because this is the new normal with Ryan Hogarth, and I was given the opportunity to have a conversation with Riccardo Sapgni, who, if you have anything to do with blockchain and crypto, you've heard of him. If that's your thing, you know who he is. He's very involved in that space and has been since for as long as most people wish they'd been involved in crypto. I think the first time I mentioned blockchain and Bitcoin in a presentation was 2012. And if I'd understood anything about it at that time, I would have bought and been wealthy. But now I'm not. But anyway, so Riccardo is a very interesting person, and as I said, involved in blockchain and crypto. But I think our conversation is not going to focus too much on that, because I think there's a lot more around that I'm interested in. So first of all, Riccardo, hello, welcome, and thanks for taking time out. I know you live in Plet, so you're in Joburg very briefly, and made some time available to chat with me, so thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah. So you, I guess, are a proper, I like to, we should avoid the labels and whatever, but you're right in that sort of young millennial space that, when everyone talks about these people kind of changing the world. You've grown up in a digital world.
Yeah.
So I think, Riccardo, let's start off just briefly. How did you get involved with what you're doing, and where are you now? And then we'll get into other stuff.
Cool. So I started off as a developer, worked my way up to
what sort of developing?
Software developer. So initially I worked with Delphi a lot.
Okay.
And then worked with Microsoft C#.
Okay.
And in between dabbled.
And were you making a living doing this?
This was my job.
Salaried employee.
Okay. And I always had a side hustle. It was always like, well, this is what I do to pay the bills, and then this is the next big thing that I'm doing. Eventually worked my way up to quite a senior position at a listed company, and did that for about 2 years, and got very frustrated with the amount of red tape, with the way we treated our employees. I felt that there was a misalignment of incentives, where we were so focused on shareholders that we forgot about how to treat our people properly. And that frustrated me no end. I just felt like I couldn't get things done. And so under the encouragement of my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I quit to start an import-export business, because I knew nothing about import-export, so it made sense to do that. So somehow managed to get to make that successful. I built all the back-end systems for it, which I think helped, because when you have something where you have a reasonably good product line, but maybe not the best product line, but your systems are just so slick, and integrating into all the buyer systems is just easy, then you have a better experience for all of the distributors and resellers and retailers than anyone else. So they don't care if your product is even subpar. They're buying from you because just it's easy for them. And so we managed to turn that into a successful business. And that freed me up a lot, and I was then able to think about what I wanted to do next.
Another side hustle.
Yeah, that's it. It was like, what's my next side hustle? I wasn't content with Riccardo, the guy who does import-export. I wanted to be Riccardo, the guy that starts and builds.
Well, what was the thing for you? I mean, because I see on Twitter you call yourself a serial entrepreneur, like the breakfast cereal. But I mean, but what's the drive? Was it to become fabulously wealthy, fabulously famous, change the world? Was there anything noble in it at all, or was it just the interest in doing stuff?
I think so. I've never really been focused on wealth and on anything like that. I enjoy problem solving, and I enjoy building stuff. But there's this part of me that just loves meeting people and engaging with people. So one of my early jobs was when I was sort of still in school and so on. I worked as a waiter, and I loved that. And I was saying to my wife the other day that if everything fell apart and I had to go back and work as a waiter, I'd love it, because I just love that constant, every day is a new thing. There's this constant influx of new people. So I think that from that perspective, it's just having new challenges and ever moving targets really feeds me. But then building things also. Yes. I've been playing with Lego for my entire life.
Okay.
And I'm mid-30s now, and I still feel like I'm playing with Lego, just with bigger blocks.
So you're 36. Well, okay, let's go back to 2012. That was about the time you got involved in Bitcoin.
Early 2011 was when
2011,
when I really started getting involved.
Okay, and Bitcoin was worth what then? Less than $1 probably.
Like it was such a weird concept to even think about buying it, because you could mine it relatively trivially.
Yes.
And there were all sorts of faucets where you could go and just be like, I hit the button and then it gives me 0.13 Bitcoin out of the faucet, which today is worth a significant amount of money. So there was acquiring Bitcoin didn't require like signing up on an exchange or anything.
But why did you get involved? What was the interest in it?
So the initial interest, I read a Slashdot article, and it was about this Google engineer that was building a Java-based Bitcoin library. And I was like, well, what's a Bitcoin? I mean, I'd like peripherally read about it, but I hadn't really paid attention. And I did a bit of digging because the Google engineer was very well respected, a guy called Mike Hearn. And, on a technical level, I was like, if he finds it interesting, maybe I should find it interesting too. So I did a bit of digging, and I was like, well, there's a bunch of security claims that are made as to how this thing behaves in a decentralized environment and how it can't be gamed and it can't be shut down and so on. And I didn't believe those claims. Partly due to a misunderstanding of the consensus mechanism of Nakamoto consensus, but mostly just because I'm a natural skeptic. So I was like, haha, yes, okay.
Yeah, but also, I mean, when you're talking technology and someone says that, it's unbreakable, you're like, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
It just seems like bullshit,
absolutely
right?
It does. Yeah. And so that was the thing that drove me initially. Was I was like, I can break this thing. I tend to gravitate towards finding flaws in systems. It's just a natural part of my thinking process. I poke holes in things, and so when I first read the white paper, I was like, nah, there's definitely something I can do here. And so I set about trying to find ways of running a bunch of nodes and Sybil attacking the network, and really just set my mind to breaking Bitcoin. And in that process, in that learning about Bitcoin and digging through the code and trying to figure out, like, this is how the wire protocol works, this is how the chain selection algorithm works. In that process, I learned so much about the inner workings of the consensus mechanism and about the delicate balance of incentives. And that sort of really catapulted my interest in Bitcoin.
So that's 2011. Now we're 2018, 7 years later. To say that Bitcoin and blockchain has matured is probably a massive overstatement, but it's come a long way, and it's certainly come into the public consciousness, and nobody understands it. Well, there's very few people that understand it.
Well, you're not wrong.
Yeah. So what is your view of the long-term impact of blockchain on the world in general? Without getting, I mean, because this is itself a 3-hour conversation, but just as simple as possible, what is your view of blockchain's relevance and impact in the world in the coming 5, 10, 20 years?
Sure. So I think we're in a weird space right now. I feel very much like there's people have identified a money-making opportunity, and so we're attracting the wrong sort of people.
Absolutely.
I would say a good 95 to 98% of the people that are entering the space because they think it's going to make them fabulously wealthy. There is a small slither of people that have entered the space and are entering the space who are interested in building cool stuff and in building stuff that might potentially change the world. And those are the people that I try to focus on. Those are the people that I find interesting. People are in it like they're scammers, or they're in it for the money grab. Maybe they don't even acknowledge within themselves that that's really why they're doing it, but they're outmoded and outclassed from a technical perspective, and it's clear in terms of what they're building. They're taking shortcuts left, right, and center, and I think that we're going to at some point get past that. We're going to work those people out the system, and then we're going to have a much larger portion of people who are building cool stuff. And then the potential becomes massive, because just by having systems where money has been created or wealth has been created, and it has already been applied to researchers who otherwise would have had to apply for grants and so on, now they're able to apply their mind to all sorts of interesting problems because they're getting paid. That is fascinating because it hasn't existed previously. Open source software developers have struggled previously to get paid. And now suddenly it's like, well, we want to pay you to come work on this open source piece of software. And there's all this peripheral stuff you'll need to build that is maybe not directly related to it. And that becomes really interesting. So I think that there's going to be almost a trickle-down effect from a technical perspective where people are working on libraries and parts of the ecosystem which aren't directly related to cryptocurrency, but bring the open source world up in general.
Yeah, well, I think my interest in blockchain, or my fascination with it, is what it means to the world beyond crypto, because there are massive. So in your view, have we come far enough that there's no going back? There never again be a world without the blockchain.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's become an unstoppable force. There's no doubt about that. As to what that impact actually looks like in 4 or 5 decades time, I don't know.
Yes.
I think that once we wash all of the muck out the system, then maybe we realize that blockchain's only really good for currency and one or two other things, and that's okay. The fact of the matter is that a blockchain-based reserved currency for the world is, I think, an eventuality. I think it's at this point in time, we're too far down the road, and the systems are maturing rapidly, and there's no amount of regulation or disinterest or anything like that that's going to change the fact that a censorship-resistant, tamper-resistant, blockchain-based system is ideally suited for the world's reserve currency, far more so than the US dollar.
That's a very interesting view, and I'm trying to picture what the world looks like when that is the case. And it is hard because I guess it's like the internet, isn't it? Talk about the impact of the internet 25 years ago.
Yeah.
You can't. There's just not enough frame of reference to understand how it can impact and evolve.
And it's true. If the mid 90s, when you thought about the internet, no one was thinking about wireless.
No.
Everyone was like, well, the internet is a modem that has a cable that plugs into it.
Yeah.
And so your frame of reference was that.
Yes.
And so our frame of reference right now is very much like, these are how blockchain systems fit together. But, you fast forward 20, 30 years and that thinking is going to change.
Okay, so let's move beyond this. You're a person who's made a living, built businesses explored in a digital world, and I think we are still at the very beginning of the digital revolution. But you're someone who's built businesses not in the traditional sense of. But what is your education, by the way? Are you
a BCom informatics and logistics?
Oh, okay, so you are properly classically educated. Let's say that. So what is your view of the world? Are you positive that the world's moving? There are problems, we understand that, but overall, are you like the world's in a good place? It's gonna get better, or are you like we're pretty much all screwed? And
look, I think that you're right. There are problems. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think that for a lot of those problems, we probably don't have the solution. I think that we've tried, for example, many different forms of governance. None of them have worked. They've all been failures to a greater or lesser degree. So maybe what we have right now is the lesser degree, and I think that's okay. I think it's not. It's certainly better than dictatorships and so on. And fine, we've that if that's what we have right now, I'm happy to survive under that system. I don't think we're ever going to have some sort of person who's going to rise to power who's going to just be the perfect president or the perfect
benevolent dictator.
It's just never going to happen. There's always humans are too complex, and there are too many bad elements. And often, as technical people, we tend to design systems thinking only about the good people. We believe in the generally benevolent nature.
We don't assume
humans.
someone's going to weaponize the internet.
And yet they have. They absolutely have. Facebook has been weaponized to the point where it can influence world politics.
Well, then let me ask you this. Let me ask the question in a different way. we're at a pace of technological evolution that's bewildering. And we've been on this arc for a long time, ever since we started with technology, but we've reached the point where it's just, there's so much innovation every single day in so many industries, it's almost impossible to keep up. Has all this technology, and specifically digital, when we look at like social media, and the ability of someone like you to have a global audience if he chooses to have, has this been good for the world?
I think so. I think it's highlighted things where that were otherwise shrouded in darkness, and I think that it's definitely organizations like WikiLeaks and so on, love them or hate them, and they are definitely polarizing.
Yes.
One thing that has been good is they have provided a platform for the exposure of information, and the reality is information wants to be free. People can try cover things up, they can try hide things under the rug, and eventually those things come out. And certainly everyone has secrets. I have secrets, and there's some secrets I hope I take to my grave, and that's fine. But the reality is that those platforms exist for those secrets to come out.
Yes.
And some of that has been damaging to individuals, but good for the world. And I think that that's really the coming of the information age. At the same time, it's also led to interesting ways of manipulating information, ways of presenting information which are, they appear to be leaks, they appear to be, the bringing things to light, but it's just done in a specific way that is good for one organization or one country or one person.
With an agenda.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there's a few views about the world right now. You have people like Steven Pinker, who are on, according to their research and by every measurement, the world is better by every imaginable standard. The world is better today than it has been, in terms of our ability to overcome disease, to overcome financial issues. The world is better. Then there are others who look around and they just go, the world's a complete fuck up, and where are we going to go to from here? Where do you kind of sit on that scale?
Yeah, look, I definitely think that there's no doubt that there have been improvements. You can't deny them. I think that the problem is that we sometimes live in a bit of a microcosm where we're like, the improvements are visible to me, and yet the man on the street might not have the same view. And even if mortality rates and so on have been improved drastically, does it affect the guy that's living in a shack?
Yes.
Does it affect the people of North Korea? Does it affect women living in the Middle East? It might eventually, but that impact is not being felt right now. And I think that that's really it might be a perception problem, but that's the world that we're living in.
So I've had a view which I felt very strong about, but I've now come to challenge it within myself, because I'm not too sure of, there are global problems that need to be solved. Problems of infrastructure, problems of wealth, and so on. Country like South Africa, where there's a lot of poverty, where there's a lot of unemployment. And I've had the view, when I saw the rise of Google and Amazon and Facebook, and I went, and Google desperately wants every citizen in the world to have internet access, as does Facebook. And I was looking at this and went, what? Maybe the world's great problems can be solved by private enterprise, because there's the will, and they've got the access to technology, whereas governments and municipalities, they're so bogged down by whatever that they just can't move forward. So I went, what? It's Google and Facebook and others that are going to save the world, because they're going to bring this technology for the good of everybody. And then you look at what's happening with Facebook and with, maybe Google's become too big for its own good, maybe, and you start to wonder about that. And I don't know, but somehow there has to be, how does technology solve the world's problem? Because it can.
Yeah.
But how do we get it to do it?
I think that the problem is that there are two problems, really. The first is that things do get to a point, a company will get to a point where it's too big to really do good, to unilaterally do good. It might want to unilaterally do good, but it's always going to push the boundaries. There is no company that can categorically say that they don't do that. And I think one of the best examples of this are pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies answer to their shareholders. And so they might initially be set up to do good, to save lives, but they're answering to their shareholders, which means that they do a bunch of research, they find a cure, and then they need to now produce medication and price it at such a point where that medication makes them profit. And they want to maximize that profit, which sometimes means doing less further study, less further research, pricing drugs out of the accessibility of ordinary citizens. Now that misalignment of incentives sucks, because it means that a company set up to save lives is now not really in the business of saving lives once they get to a certain size. And the second big problem there as well is the people with the tanks and the guns are not private enterprise. They're still governments. And so there's a point at which a private enterprise can accomplish so much, but unless they, start their own militia, there's a limit to what they can accomplish.
Sure. No, that is a very good point. I think the question, we were talking just a moment ago about Apple's just reached $1 trillion. And I do think that there's, you've mentioned shareholders, and not just pharmaceuticals. Every, Facebook is now being sued by a bunch of its shareholders because, Facebook's trying to course correct, we think, and that's going to involve a loss of revenue or a loss of profit. And of course the shareholder goes, well, that's no good for me. Might be good for the world, but it ain't good for me. And maybe that model needs a rethink where you're, because how much good can you do when you've got a shareholder saying, okay, I need an extra 1.5 points on my on my return.
Well, that's it. And how can you go to a point where you're big enough to make a global difference if you don't have shareholders that have put in the money and taken the risk to get you to that point? So it's a complete catch-22, and I don't see an immediate solution. I don't see a way that as human beings we can figure our way out of that. That said, you I don't know what the future holds.
Sure.
I have some idea that we're going to try and continue to improve things, and that's good. I don't think that we should sit and be pessimistic and think that the world's falling apart, so why don't I just sit in my corner and cry? But at the end of the day, I think there are limits to what we can accomplish, and I think if we're pragmatic about them, then maybe that's a little bit better than this eternal optimism, which is largely unrealistic.
Yes. Okay, well, we don't know what the future holds, but what's your grand plan? Where do you go to from here?
So there's a little island in the South Pacific. I don't know. I like building things.
Are you living your life to a grand plan? As I guess my question, rather than, hey, listen, this is interesting now, and I'll keep playing. It's the Lego I'm building now, and you're saying, what's the future? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if there's a bigger, better Lego that comes along. Is there a grand plan, or is it kind of let's just keep rolling and do stuff as long as it's interesting?
No, I think that there is to some degree a grand plan. I want to continue to be impactful, and I think that one of the ways that I can be impactful and have been impactful is job creation in South Africa. We clearly have a problem here with our education system's a mess, but we have a problem with jobs. So with all of the stuff that I set up, I'm always looking at ways of creating employment opportunities across the board. But primarily my focus right now is on creating opportunities for people who are experienced and who are really good at what they do, because I think that we run the risk of a brain drain of the smartest minds in the country leaving because of lack of opportunity. So I'm trying to create opportunity there, and then have that trickle down, to people who have not had opportunities for education and so on. And that's the best that I can do right now. That's all that I can do to be impactful.
I think that's and maybe it's a good play. We'll sort of close on this. I think you've raised a very important point. I was at a roundtable discussion a couple of days ago where the topic was, will IoT, the Internet of Things, is it going to risk jobs in South Africa? Will it cut jobs if we automate things or bring in the Internet of Things? And it was interesting as I was listening to the conversation, and my thought was, we're in the middle of a job apocalypse right now. I think we have somewhere close to 60% youth unemployment rate. So we might worry about what technology is going to do in the future. We have an issue right now, and technology and enterprise and opportunity and entrepreneurship can go some way to solving those problems, the future is not in saving the jobs we have, because it's not enough. It's not enough now. So I think that's an important point. So how? I don't know if there's a question around that. I think you stated that's you want to be impactful in helping to create the opportunities for experienced people. Someone who goes to university, gets a degree and is unemployed, or has worked in an industry and now needs further work. So how? I don't know. What are your thoughts on how do people get involved in something like this? How do they do something to be more impactful?
So maybe an example of where I think that there is massive scope in South Africa to be impactful is there's this whole land reclamation thing that's happening, and land reclamation primarily seems to be focused around farming. They want to get farming land back, and they want to put people on those farms. The problem is that a lot of that thinking is based around the idea of manual labor, and manual labor is going away. Already recently, in the past 6 months, a farm in China has performed a full end-to-end automated run from getting the land ready, preparing the land, tilling the land, doing all of that, planting the seeds, having everything grow, prune, maintain, manage, harvest the crop, package the crop, and have it ready for distribution, all automated with one guy sitting in a control center. Now
I saw a great quote or someone told me a great quote yesterday. It said the factory of the future will have no people. There'll be one person and there'll be a dog. The dog's the only reason the man is there is to feed the dog, and the only reason the dog is there is to make sure the man doesn't touch the machines.
But it's true.
Yes.
Now, if you think about it from that perspective, if you think about that automated world, what are we going to need in order for that automated world to survive? Well, we're going to need mechanics. We're going to need system experts. We're going to need people who are ready to be trained on, drones and automated systems and that sort of thing. So the world is going to become a mixed, from a skills perspective, a mix of mechanics maintaining the hardware and software and electronics people. And so I'm sort of thinking, like, if that's where we're going to go in South Africa, how do we catapult that? How do we instead of taking these people out of their situation and giving them land and then saying, here's the keys to a tractor and here's a bag of soil and whatever, go forth and farm. What if we take them away and we educate them and we train them on all these systems, so that as those automated systems start to get deployed, as they start to get rolled out, now they can go and they can work and they can earn a living, because those farms are just going to be automated and it doesn't matter who owns the land. It's going to make no difference. But that job creation has to start now.
Absolutely, and that's the gulf we live with, is that there are solutions. I mean, there are solutions. Given enough will, given a bit of money, well, given quite a lot of money, these things could be done right now. But I guess we get a bit overwhelmed by the gulf between that and the reality of where government sits now. All right, fine. Well, listen, I thank you very much for taking the time again. I've enjoyed this discussion. Someone who's kind of out in the world doing it and living in a world that is a new normal, that is different from the world of the 80s and the 90s and, well, even the 2000s. And good luck. I know you're off to Panama to tell the government there how they should be dealing with cryptocurrency and all that. So you don't have to get into detail on that, but good luck with that. But thank you.
Thanks very much for having me.
Awesome, mate. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.